All right, so
And
welcome to, yeah, you guys are welcome to mute yourselves during the recording. And if you have any questions, you're welcome to, of course, interrupt and ask whenever they pop into your head. I know I'm the kind of person where if I don't ask a question right then and there, it disappears. So welcome to our Floriani Total Control U lace class. I'm going to show you guys a little bit about how to use basic shapes to create freestanding lace, how to add dimension inside the lace, and also how to use their new lace feature. And if you do a stitch out, how to change some of the dimensions and all sorts of things like that. Lace ornaments are really fun and easy to make with this new feature that Floriani added, where beforehand you had to manually create the mesh lace background, which was doable, but fairly obnoxious. So now it's nice and easy. So I'm gonna do a screen share and go right into Floriani. So one of the big things you want to make sure is that you have Floriani updated to one of the more recent versions, because the lace add-on was a newer add-on. I'm going to start a new design here. So, oh my goodness, my computer's already being cranky. Okay, so when it comes to versions, I'm just going to show you guys what version Floriani. We're at 3.718 at the moment, which I believe is one of the more recent versions. I don't know if they've come out with an update recently, but your build should be somewhere around this, the 3.718. And to check this, all you have to do is go to Help on the top here and click on About, and that pops up your recent version. You can also look at your build number and go to Help and check for updates, and it should open up your internet browser, and it may not show you on my screen. I don't know if it's showing the internet browser on mine or not, but it should show you what the most recent version is, which if we scroll down, 3.718, perfect, so we're good. So every once in a while, I do like to check and make sure that I'm at the most recent version, because otherwise you might be missing out on some really nice updates. Okay, so let's start with some of the design elements with lace. With lace, you need to have a defined shape. Unfortunately, you can't just do cool little swirls and have them be lace. You have to have some sort of an outline for your stitches to hold. So for today, we're going to be using our basic shapes. It's a button right here on the top of your screen with a little square and a circle and a pencil. And if you hover over it, for mine, it says rectangle. You could click on it and there's some super basic shapes that show up, but those are boring. Let's go into custom shape, which is right below. And as soon as my computer catches up with my thoughts, it will pop up a little box that has lots of really nice custom shapes. There it goes. Okay, so all these guys are usable. There are many, many shapes to choose from. I figured because Valentine's Day is coming up at some point, I was going to use a heart shape, but you guys are welcome to choose whichever shape suits your fancy. Heart starts with an H. It's in alphabetical order. There we are. There's hearts. I had to remember what letter heart started with. That's good. It's been a day. All right, so heart 004 is what I'm going to go with. And this pops up. There we go, right on my screen. Now the size doesn't matter too much yet. We can always decide that now or later. You know, this is a 3.5 by a 3.06. If you're making an ornament, about 3 inches is usually the good size for that. So I'm going to change this down to 3 and make sure my maintain aspect ratio is checked. So think about a lace ornament kind of about the same size you would do a logo on a shirt. Usually around the 3 inches is a good size. If you have anything bigger, it may be too large to hang up on a tree or wherever you're hanging it. If it's really small, it's going to be very difficult to stitch out cleanly. However, you may want to make lace and make earrings. So maybe you want it to be smaller. This is just going to be something you're going to have to try and test and see what size works best for you. But for right now, I'm just going to do 3 inches. Now, it doesn't matter if this is a fill or an outline. It's just a heart. Let me move my... The one problem about screen sharing is that the little zoom boxes tend to block all my buttons. Okay, so we have our heart, and now I'm going to show you guys a really cool, easy button. It's at the bottom of your screen over on the right-hand side. Move my zoom box up again. And it is called Auto Lace. So when you click on it, There it goes. It changes your design. So what it does is it automatically creates a lace or mesh fill on the back. And I'm gonna actually break apart my design a little bit here for you guys to see. I'm gonna remove my properties so you can see the sequence. This is white. Let's change that to a color that's visible. There we go. So that one's called Penguin. So we have our lace mesh, which is the color violet here. I'm gonna actually break this up so you guys can see what it looks like, what it does. All right, so we have our lace mesh, which is our background piece. This is this. The next one is, it's kind of like a regular fill almost, but it's a little thicker, and it goes over the mesh and goes underneath our satin stitch, which gives it a little bit more stability. And our last stitch here that it does on the top of everything is our steel stitch, our satin stitch around the outside. And this seals everything so it doesn't come apart. So when you make lace mesh, when we used to make it, we would do just the steel and just the mesh like this, and that would be your design. But sometimes you'll notice the edges will curl and it won't hold up nicely. This particular button does these 3 layers, which gives it really nice stability and allows it to stand up when you rinse away your stabilizer. And that's one of the big tests. If you design something and you rinse away the stabilizer and you're left with a pile of thread, that's because the stitches were not stable enough to hold themselves up. So I'm gonna hit undo and bring these guys back together. There we go. So now we have our 3 layers back together again. Now, when you have your lace, you have these 3 different colors that it breaks it up to. And of course, you can always click on these and change them. So for example, let's say I want that bottom color to be, I'm gonna hide my thumbnail video. There we go. Now I can see. I'm gonna have my bottom layer here be, let's say, really light lavender color. And then maybe I want my heart to be pink and red. Which actually, I think I'm going the wrong direction. Red is to the left. And I can change these 2 so that way it looks really nice. So we'll do pink for the next one, and then the last one here we'll do is red. So you can kind of make them look a little bit like an ombre effect if you would like. Oops, past red. So there we go. So that looks pretty good. The other thing you could do with this weird middle layer here is you can match it to the background. So I can do, apparently this is a purple color called haze. Purple haze apparently. And I can match it and it blends in a little bit nicer with the background. Or you can match it to the satin stitch, which will make it look like it's a thicker satin stitch. So, you know, if you don't like that weird middle thing, you feel like it's taking away from your design, you can always change the color to make it match. But once you have this shape, you can fill in things in here. So I'm going to go back into our custom shapes once again, and let's add some designs. But instead of, I mean, I could use these guys, but I'm going to go into a different folder up here. There's an easy art folder. And as soon as my computer catches up, in there's a bunch of regular vector designs, and vectors are what we work with pre-embroidery. That's our artwork images. Come on, computer. There it goes. So I can put a bunch of different things in there. There's some gears and swirls. The swirls is what I'm looking for. So let's say, which one do I want to put in? Let's do this weird one. I'm going to flip it. And see if I can fit it in the center of my heart. Now, the way that this vector image works, there we go, it's a little off kilter there. Yeah, that looks pretty cool. The way that this vector image works is it's a little bit, it's not welded together. So if I go into the plus sign in my sequence view, you'll notice that all of these parts are actually separate. This is nice and slightly irritating. It's nice in the fact that because these are separate, I could remove a section. Like if I don't like this little piece, I can remove it and then I have a different shape here. However, it's also irritating because if I go to take this and turn it into satin stitches or a steel stitch in this case, it may not line up nicely because it's separated. I'm going to try it and see what it looks like with it separate. And then if it doesn't work, I'll show you guys how to weld it. Actually, well, it's a little bit messed up. There's some weird stitches going on. Let's do a 3D. Yeah, so it's not too bad. But personally, I would rather have this bottom piece here, this little, I don't even know what that would be called, welded together so it looks a little cleaner. So I'm going to hit back and let's talk about welding, because that's something too, you want your designs to be clean that sit on top of this because it's only being held up by the mesh underneath. So this, all right, so I'm going to hit, hold down shift or control. Actually, I'm going to click on my first one and hit control to the three elements here that I want to weld. I'm going to right click, and then I am going to go under transform and weld. Now, it looks like it removed a little section there. So what I'm going to do is click on this and see what it did. And to see, you can go under your shape tool. And I'm going to see if this separated it or if it's just something I can easily change. It looks like it may have actually separated these. All right, so we're going to hit undo and go back. And okay, good. And if you double click on the magnifying glass, it recenters. So I'm just going to try to merge two of these first. Sometimes if you try to merge too many things at the same time, it does some weird stuff. Okay. So I'm going to right click, transform, and weld. Let's see if those two go together. There we go. We got part of it. And now I'm going to try this last one. I'm going to click on it, hold down control, and the other design, right click, transform, and weld. Ugh, it did it again. Well, that's just annoying. So if it keeps doing weird things like that, then what that means is that it's not overlapping well enough. So I'm going to temporarily change the color of this to see what's going on. One way we can fix this is actually just to pull this in a little more, because it's going to weld, it's going to remove what we change over here anyway. Now, let's try this again. Click on this, control, transform, and weld. Well, it changed all the color of it, but that's okay. We can go back to the color. But see how now it welds nicely? Sometimes you might need to play with it and alter some of it. So now we should be able to, hopefully, do an auto satin. And it did some weird stuff, but we're going to go into our shapes and fix that. These little yellow and black lines, let me zoom in a little more on these. I should say the orange and black lines. These are, they separate them. They actually will split off where your design is. So we're going to put this guy, oops. I just grabbed my start and stop accidentally. There we go. We're going to put this guy across here. And then these ones, these yellow and black ones, are actually our stitch direction. So we can take them and move them. If we want our stitches to go across this way, we're going to move them. And then left click, see what it does. That's a little better. There we go. And now we can take, I'm going to double click and zoom out and take our other design and do the same thing with our auto satin at the bottom. Auto satin is your best friend. I love it because it's very easy to digitize. So now we have this design sitting on top of our embroidery. Now what? I'm going to go and just delete the artwork underneath on my screen. If you have the quilting program, it sometimes combines these and overlaps it, which I find to be rather irritating. I don't know if everybody's program does that. I know when you have the quilting one, it does it. So I don't know if you don't have the quilting, it may not do that. So ignore that part if you don't have the quilting. So what we want to do is I'm going to bring back my properties. There we go. And I want to change the density down a little bit. If this is a very loose density, it may not stitch nicely on top of our mesh, or at least it will stitch nicely until we, wash away the stabilizer. So I'm going to move my density down to about a 0.4 and hit apply. And 0.4 is pretty good. That's usually what I do for freestanding lace, and that seems to work pretty well. Now, one thing is we have this beautiful lace heart. We have a cool design that we threw on top of it, but we have no way to hang it up at the moment. There's no little nice, well, anything to hang it up. So we need to add a little circle that we can use for a ribbon. And I'm going to show you guys another way to create lace. And then I'm going to go through this again, or you guys can ask questions because this is the basics. We're going to go into our custom shape. and just click our ellipse or circle. And you could just left click, and if you hold down Control, it'll draw a perfect circle. And I'm just going to draw a circle that looks like it'll be a good size for a loop. Now it popped way down in my sequence view here. See if I can find it. There it is. To reselect, and I'm going to center this kind of so it's underneath my heart. And now on the bottom of my screen, you're not going to go into the auto lace, but the mesh steel. This means that it's a steel stitch. It doesn't have the fill in the middle. It's just a enforced steel stitch that will work better for freestanding lace. So mesh steel, once again, we're going to click on that. And there we go. Now this guy, I'm going to do two things with it. We want it to be underneath our heart. So we're going to bring it all the way, left click and drag it all up to the top under all items. So therefore it's going to bury itself underneath. It is apparently black, so we're going to change that to be red so it blends in a little better. And I wonder if I can get rid of my artwork. Hold on one second, that little artwork line is going to bother me. Let me just delete that real quick. There we go. The last thing we want to do on our little circle at the top is the start and stop. For some reason, if we go into our shape tool on the left here, so again, our shape tool, see how the start and stop is right at the top? I made a bunch of really cool lace things, and because of this start and stop at the top, it actually is not as strong up here. So it fell apart. So I would put the lace on, the little string, and to hang it up, and it would just rip right through. So you want to take this little stop button, which is our red, and our happy little green button, and drag them down to the bottom. And then left click. And that will actually have the start and stop reinforced underneath your lace, so it will not come apart on you. And there we go. So there is our first little lace design. And that's pretty easy. So, oh, go ahead.
I have a question. I was just trying to do it with you. And when I went to hit the mesh steel, it didn't come out right. Was it mesh steel that I heard from you?
Yes. So let me, hold on, my computer is loading at the moment. There we go.
But it did okay when I did the regular steel.
So the problem with regular steel, I mean, to show you guys the difference, your mesh steel and your lace steel, the difference is actually the stitching underneath. So this of course doesn't show you it. I'm going to show you guys, I can show you this a little easier with another circle. All right, so I have another circle here, and I'm going to go to the regular steel stitch. So it looks fine, right? Once it's loaded, it looks just like a regular steel. However, you need the density to be turned down to about a 0.3. And then you also need underlay. That's the big difference between a regular steel stitch and that mesh steel. So the density and underlay. So I can go here, and I believe, no, it's not center line. I got to remember which ones. Oh, they actually have a mesh underlay button you can choose. Yeah, see how this does this weird, like, Greek sort of style squares? The mesh underlay is what you want. So if I just click mesh, I can hit apply, and that will do the same exact thing as our little mesh heart. So 0.3 density, and mesh underlay. Before this was around, you could get away with I did a parallel and a zigzag that I would put underneath, which did a similar effect, but they don't allow you to combine those anymore. So just click the mesh.
I think I was doing mesh run. That's a difference.
That is a mesh run.
I was doing what was called on my computer called it was called run motif. I think that's what I was doing, whatever run motif is.
Yeah, not that one. So you want to do mesh steel. And that's how you do edges, like open designs like this that won't fall apart on you. So for example, if I wanted to, let me get rid of that, if it'll let me delete it. Come on, computer. Here's one, delete the other circle. So if I wanted to add a design around this heart, maybe like fake lace, and I don't want it to have a fill inside of it, I could use that mesh steel in the same way. Or if I had maybe a little balloon string coming off of this that I don't want it to be filled in with that fill, I can do that with the mesh steel.
Could you show me the mesh steel button again? Because that's what I think I'm having trouble with.
All right, so I'm going to throw my little pretty circle in there. And then I just need to select it. There we go. And my computer, because of the resolution, it cuts it off, but it's on the bottom right. And if you can't see it, there's little teeny tiny arrows that have the ones that you can't see.
Oh, I was way over on the wrong side. I see it now. I got it.
Mesh steel. All right, awesome.
Thank you.
Not a problem. It's much easier to do rather than trying to do it manually. So
Oh, and that was good. That's good for me to know. Thank you. Because I've made several of these already, and I don't know what I did in that part. So
that's weird. My computer's being
probably gonna fall apart on me.
And that's why, you know, I'll do a test. So one of the things with mesh, the biggest thing is you want to test it because you never know if it's going to overlap weird. I'm going to show you guys an example of one that I did do recently. Actually, I have a couple in here that I've done that I'm going to show you guys. I did a bunch of regular lace that I had purchased off of Urban Threads early in the pandemic to sell. And I had a lady say, hey, can you do a freestanding lace cannon? I was like, a cannon? Huh. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to try to digitize it myself. And this was before the lace program. So I'm going to do a 3D view. I actually had to hand draw the mesh underneath. And as you can see, it's kind of glitchy. It's not perfect. This is something that I need to redo. And there's not that third layer, that middle layer holding between the steel and the actual mesh. So it's not bad. It actually did stitch out. It's a little bit crinkly on the edges, like it doesn't hold up on its own as nicely as the new versions do. So my plan is to redo this. This was actually, this little loop here was where the string went through, and then you could put a brad here and connect the wheel to the base of the cannon. So it actually, the wheel turned. It was pretty cool. It came out nicely. That was what our picture was for the class, because it was the only picture of lace I had that wasn't offensive. Because the other one, and I'm going to show you guys the most recent one I did with this program, was these guys. And I had done some ones with swear words, but we're not going to talk about those. But these guys, I thought were a little bit apt to be doing at the end of last year, although apparently we need to update it already for this year. But this is the same thing, just with layers. So I wish I had the artwork version of this, but I found a picture that I liked and I traced it. So I traced the fire, I traced, you know, the background here and the front of the dumpster and the side, and used that same lace feature to recreate the entire shape. So now I have multiple colors inside my lace design. Like for the fire, you know, I have my mesh is yellow, and then that middle layer I told you about is orange, and then the final satin stitch is red. So I have the look of fire pretty easily. And actually, is this, yeah, so this part here is one of the only artworks. So this is the artwork I traced and then turned it into the fire, you know, with the mesh steel. So I'm going to show you guys, you know, I traced the fire. I'm going to go into my auto lace. And it has it here, and break this up. And so my first one, I can change that, you know, light orange or yellow, then that orange, and lastly the red. The hardest thing is sitting and tracing around that whole design. So with this in mind, let's talk about doing a more complicated design. I'm going to quickly search for a design online. Let's do lace heart, I don't know, vector. Let's see if we could find something simple to download. And I'll show you guys how to trace and then turn that into lace. Ones with multiple colors are just a little bit more work. Now, is this showing my computer screen still, or is it just showing FTCU?
It's showing the cannon.
Okay, so I am searching in Firefox at the moment for a heart that I like. So it's not showing you, but you guys are welcome to look online for a design that you want to turn into an ornament. And that way you can follow along. This will work. I found a good one. And when you're searching for images, usually I try to search for silhouette or vector or, you know, something along those lines that'll bring up a simpler design, where some of the designs that pop up otherwise tend to be rather complicated. All right, let me just, I did find one. I'm just going to save it to my computer. Of course, it's a PNG, so that's not going to work. One of the things is it needs to be a JPEG. Or it could be a GIF and things like that. But if it's not, then sometimes it doesn't work. And let's see if this one works. Here we go, I found one. Okay, so I'm gonna go back into Floriani. So what I wanna do now, I'm gonna just get out of my Canon here, because my computer doesn't like it when I have too many things open. And we're gonna exit out of my heart, and let's do a new design. There it goes. And I'm going to do an auto artwork wizard. This is the lazy way of picking up an image. We're going to see if it works. Oh, actually, you know what? I'm silly. There's a bunch of designs in here that are pre-done. You know what? Let's choose one of these designs. These are better. Let's do this butterfly. So auto artwork's great because when you have an image that's rather simple, we're gonna have to make that a little bigger. That's tiny. You can do an auto artwork and it'll just bring it right in. It'll sense the colors and you can just click on things and change your design right into an embroidery file. Where if you have regular design, you have to trace it. I'm going to show you guys both ways. So for this, I'm going to bring in my properties. It's very small, so I want to bring this up again to the 3 inches. Usually you want to resize it in artwork and not in embroidery, because that way as you're digitizing it, it'll go right into the size you need and it won't mess up the stitches. Otherwise, if you resize it afterwards, you may actually have to change the stitches and alter things. So the wings here, they're pretty easy outlines. I can just go into my auto lace, and that should work for the wings. There we go. That looks pretty good. I'm going to go into, wow, those are some really ugly colors that Floriani picked out, but we can change that in a second. And his little body, it's not mesh, and I don't want it to be mesh because I think it'll be too small in a lot of places. So I'm going to use that mesh steel and see if that works. Usually it doesn't outline, so it may not. Yeah, so see how it kind of overlapped here? You know, it doesn't exactly work. So let's hit undo. Apparently it didn't undo. Oh, it undid everything. Okay then. All right, well, we're just going to redo the wings then in auto lace. If that's how Floriani's going to be today, then fine, so be it. And we'll redo his head. This time I'm going to do that auto lace, and I have a plan. What I want to do is see where the mesh is and everything else. We're going to zoom in on him a little bit as soon as it catches up with itself. Yeah, and it overlapped a little bit here, but it might be okay. I would try to stitch this out and see what it looks like first. The other thing we might be able to do is we might be able to remove. If you click on him, you can actually choose to edit the different parts of the lace for the auto lace. So for example, it says lace part, lace base, lace border. I could change that. I could change the corner style here and the size. So let's say I want to change the lace border. It's a 4.0 millimeter steel at the moment. And I could change that down, let's say to a 2. Let's see if that changes anything. Maybe that's the width. There we go. And see, it makes it a little bit cleaner looking. Let me center him a little bit better. And this is the kind of stuff you have to play with. You know, if the base, I actually may want to have it a little thicker. Maybe I want him to be all filled in. And I can, let's see, they have stitch length, grid, curve. Oh, you know what I see? All right, sorry, the lace border has that border and then the steel in it. I want the border to be thicker. That I do want to be at a 4. And see, it's going to bring it in towards the center. There we go. That's what I want. And then the steel is the 2.0, which is that thinner one. And I can even make that a little thinner. Let's see what that does. And this is something you may need to play with for detailed designs like this butterfly. Yeah, that looks much better on his antennae. And what I could even do is I could take this lace border and bring it up to a 6 and actually just completely fill in his little circle here. Oh, no, it's still not there. Let's do a 7. There we go. So it just kind of fills that in completely, which may look nicer in this case. And the wings, we can do a similar thing. I'm actually gonna see if I can change both wings at the same time. Oops, it selected everything. I don't know. I probably won't be able to change both wings at the same time then. But maybe I want to have this border be a little thinner because I want to put lots of swirls and designs in here. I can change the 4 down, and that, again, that middle section will get smaller, where the steel width here is that outside edge. Now, this is set to a round corner type, and I'm going to go back to his middle. Round seems to work, but if you see any weird outlines, you know, that maybe look jagged, you can change the steel corner type between sharp and beveled. I'm going to change it to beveled quickly. It doesn't change much up here, but his little base looks a little smoother now. Here to the corner style, this is how it's actually stitched. Usually auto turn's great, but you can also have what's called an open corner, which I'm not going to sure if it's gonna, it didn't really show you here, but an open corner was it stitches this way and it stitches the other side and leaves kind of, it looks like a little triangle is bitten out of it. Mitered means it slowly does it, kind of stitches in the center and then slowly goes around. So you can choose what type of corner to have. Your start and end, this is if you want it to tie on or tie off or anything like that. Usually this does not need to be changed. And again, our size. So our actual lace base, the changes in this, we can change the stitch length, which is where your needle penetrates your stabilizer. So in this case, it is every 2.5 millimeters. That's the average stitch length that exists on most machines these days. The spacing is the space between the mesh. So let's say I want this to be a little bit bigger, and I don't recommend really spacing this out too much, but I'm going to show you guys. Oop, hold on, let me click on one of the wings so you can actually see it. I don't recommend bringing out the mesh spacing too much because, see, when I open this up a lot, it may not actually be able to hold itself in anymore. It may not be able to hold the embroidery, and it may just be very floppy, unless you're looking for a floppy butterfly. So usually that 2.25 is pretty good, so I wouldn't mess with that too much. Unless you're planning on doing a bunch of satin stitching over it that's connected to the edges, that's going to hold it up on its own, then you could make it a little more open. And to show you guys again, I'm going to close my properties and change the colors in my wings. So we have a pink inside, that's fine. But let's do a purple middle part and maybe the outside blue. And then we can do the same on the other wing. And that's how you change the colors. Because it would stitch these out separately. So we may want to, on our machines, or well, even on here, combine the colors so that way they stitch together. So if you wanted to combine these so it stitched all these colors at the same time that were the same, there's a couple ways we can do that. There is this color sort. However, I don't think it's gonna do too much because these are combined at the moment. Did I click a different blue for one of these? Yes, I did. With the blue. There we go. Now it's all the same blue. What we need to do to combine these is we're going to right click on the wing, break up lace, and right click on the other wing and break up lace. And then if we do a color sort, it should combine. There we go. So now it combined the two pink underlay, the middle part here, that border, and then the steel stitch at the end. And then this guy has to be on its own and separate on top. But this will save you some time from having to rethread if you have a design that has multiple sections like this. And breaking up the lace does not damage it in any way. It doesn't mean like literally breaking it, you're just separating the steps. And you can do the same thing with applique too. So this is something that we'd want to play with and stitch out and make sure it works. And of course, we still have to add his little ring on top to add in our ribbon. Looks pretty good of a size. And we'll just drag that down a little bit here. That's not even at all. Let's zoom in. There we go. That's better. And now I can turn him in with, again, that mesh steel. Ugh. There we go. And I did notice I have a chat question. I will check it in a moment. It's hard when I'm screen sharing. So I'm going to drag this up to all items. And then that last step I want to do once again to make sure that that circle is not going to break at the top is to just change where that start and stop is inside of my shape tool. So again, we're going to select our circle, go to shape tool. So the shape right here on the left side, and pull our little red and green dot to the bottom. And there we go. And now we have a little butterfly. So this is, again, another way with multiple colors. You can either do an auto artwork or you may have to sit and trace everything. So Diane's question was, would you stitch the ring first? And yes. So usually when I have the ring pop up, it always pops up at the bottom because I always remember to add it last. And I usually add it last too, so I can lay it out properly with the design. But if this stitches out first, it doesn't sit on top of the design like this. It'll sit underneath and kind of be a background, which you don't want that, you know, ring for the ribbon to be a foreground item. You want it to be hidden in the back. So just like that. All right, so let's grab another new design. This time I'm going to show you guys how to trace these. So if you have a complicated artwork design that is not able to be turned into artwork with the auto artwork, you'll have to trace it. And that happens a little too often. So we're going to go into our backdrop tool, which is located in two places. One is on your bottom left-hand part of the screen. It looks like a picture of mountains. And if you click on that, it'll bring you into your files and you can choose an image to trace. Or under, I think it's under file actually, file load backdrop. Both of those work. So there's a whole bunch of images that pop up automatically in here that are built in with Floriani. These are images that you can use. They are freeware. They just ask most likely that you don't sell them. Let's see if there's anything cutesy that really appeals to me at the moment. Oh, there's some cute little hearts and things. It's rare I actually sit and look through these, so let's see. Let's do the cat. Well, actually, he doesn't have multiple colors on him. Let's choose something a little more complicated. I'm going to go back up to that tree. This tree is always a good one because it has a lot of angles. So we can't, as you see, turn this right into stitches. Nothing pops up in a sequence view when you have a JPEG opened up. And the difference between a vector and an image file, like a JPEG, PNG, GIF, is that when you zoom in, it gets all blurry. Where with a vector file, it is always clean on the edges. So to trace this, it's pretty easy. And I would practice this, you know, open a lot of things, especially those little built-in free ones that come with Floriani, and just practice tracing around your designs. You'll get pretty good at it and it won't seem as daunting as it may have seemed at one point before you really practiced. You're going to click on your artwork tool up here, your pencil. And what I would suggest is zoom in a little bit, maybe a little too much there. Yeah, okay. Apparently I can't zoom in because of the size of my screen. But I'm going to start with, you know what, I'm going to start with the trunk. That one's a pretty easy one. So I'm going to left click and keep left clicking around this design. I'm actually going to go up a little past the other color. Left click, and then I'm not going to try to close this manually. There's actually a button for it. So over on your bottom left-hand side, which my screen's too small, so I have to click those tiny little arrows, there's a button that says close shape. It looks like a little circle with a dot with a line coming from it. When you click that, it'll automatically close your shape for you. So you don't have to worry about trying to match it up, because you're not going to. You're not going to be able to match that up. And then we're going to go on to the next thing. I usually trace everything first and then worry about coloring and altering. Now, as you see, I'm just going through and left clicking at each of the edges. You don't want to keep left clicking on the flat areas because you're going to leave yourself a ridiculous amount of little dots to edit. And this is a great starter project because it's all very straight lines. And again, when I get up to here, I'm going to go slightly past the previous color. The reason why is when we digitize this, no matter if it's for lace or anything else, if you have it sitting so it's right on the edge, those design stitches could separate. And then I'm going to close this shape. So you want it to overlap a little bit. And I'm just going to keep on going and tracing. Those of you who do not remember this tree, we actually used this as a class some time ago, quite a long time ago. We traced it and did a little Starry Night design. I think it was like 4 years ago in class. Or maybe 3 years ago. I don't know, but it was a while ago. And I'll click. And again, close our shape. As you can see, it starts moving pretty quick after a while. Now, if I had a design that had curves to it, if I hold down my control key as I am tracing, it actually will, and I'm going to show you guys on this part, if I hold down control, see how it adds that curve? So if I'm tracing something that's circular, I can add a curve by holding down control. And once I'm all done, let's say I don't want that curve, I can then click on my shape that I traced, click that shape tool, and I can go to the dot here, right click and hit line, and it'll go right back into a straight line. So if you do make a mistake or accidentally add a curve or want a curve afterwards, you can do that by your shape tool. Now, for the sake of argument, I'm going to pretend that this is traced pretty perfect, and it actually is pretty good. And I'm going to go through and start. I'm going to change the colors first because it's all under the same color. And then I'm going to go back through and do my lace. I always like to apply the colors first so that way I can see the work I did. There's a green. And then we'll do the lighter green again. Now, I noticed that when I do change this into a stitch type, it usually doesn't keep the colors, which is slightly irritating. But if you picked out colors and you want them to stay, I can go to the color that I have selected, right click and hit add to design palette. And that way, even if I change the color to something else, it will still keep that color as a design palette up here. These are your design colors. So I can go to each one of these colors, right click and hit add to design palette, and they will not go away on me. So that way, when I click, so I'm going to start with my trunk first, my auto lace button. If it changes the color on me, which it kept the brown underneath, it looks like, but then green for everything else. I'm just going to change it all back to brown. I can change it back pretty easily. Nope, come back. All right, so I'm going to click auto lace for everything. And then when I'm done, which I realized I never resized this design, so it may be really tiny at the moment. So I'm just going to turn everything to auto lace, and then I'm going to have to resize it because I just realized this is like 1.5 inches. This is a really tiny design. So we're going to have to fix that. Come on. There we go. Auto lace. Okay, so everything's lace at the moment. Let's change the size of our design. As I said, you're supposed to do this when you do artwork, but I was not paying attention. So we're going to change it now, which will make it look probably a lot better. Now, if you notice too, there's some weird things going on, and we're going to change that. We're going to fix that up. And one of the other things too, some of these edges look pretty gross. Our border stitches are kind of funny. So we're going to go through and change all of that so it looks cleaner. So let's start with our trunk. Now see how these edges look a little messy? I noticed that sometimes when you go to stitch these out, they actually are fine. They just look messy in your preview. And this is at a weird angle. I can also go into my shape tool and kind of pull that in because I think I didn't trace my stump straight. So it's doing a little bit of a weird angle there. That's better. And I can go in here. So let's do our lace border. Let's change that. We have a round for a steel corner type. Let's try sharp because this is supposed to be rectangular. Yeah, and that looks a little better, a little more defined. And this one, we could take down our steel width, which is our border stitch, to even a 2. And there we go, that looks a little better. And so I think the trunk is pretty good. Let's go to our bottom part of our tree. So once again, because we have round corner types, it looks kind of funny. So let's try sharp. Ugh, I think that made it worse. So let's go back, let's do bevel and see what that looks like. A little better. So what we can do too is go into our corner style, and instead of auto turn, let's play with lapped and see what these different things are. And a lot of this is just really playing. That again made it really bad. Let's try auto. You may have to play with it until you find one that really, it really works. Okay, the mitered one so far is the best one. And I'm going to show you guys what open corners looks like as well. Because now I can, since it has such a dramatic edge. And I didn't really do an open corner, but that's okay. One thing too that I'm going to point out is see how we have our satin stitch up here, and it actually is overlapping the satin stitch on the tree part above it. When you have multiple colors like this, you'll need to remove this section. To do so, I'm going to remove my properties box for a moment to show you. We're going to break up our lace. And we're going to click on only the steel because that's the only thing we want to edit, and go into our shape tool. And I want it to stop about here and maybe, I don't know, here-ish. So I'm going to right click, split line, right click and split line. And that should, in theory, separate it. There we go. And now I can remove my other steel. And I'm going to do that again on the next layer so you guys can see that again. And now we won't have that obnoxious steel stitch overlapping themselves because that's going to cause us problems when it goes to stitch out. So let's go into this shape here. It sticks past, well, our steel stitch is all a mess anyway. So let's go into our properties and see if we can fix that. Let's go back into mitered, and you may need to play again with this for a little bit. And this one's a more complicated one. Let's see if auto turn works now that it's more open. Okay, that looks a little better. And then we can edit this one. So what's nice is you can go into your shape tool, in this case, since you have it broken up now, and we can actually edit this in our shape tool. So I can add points. Let me pull this in and kind of retrace. I'm going to keep right clicking and adding points. I need to add another point. And this will, I can retrace the design since it didn't catch for some reason. All of this, I don't know why. It just kind of decided to do this weird blob of stuff over here. And you'll have to sit and add a bunch of points. Usually, this is the first time I've seen this happen where it just blobs. And again, I can just right click and hit line on these points, which will make them more pointed. So if this does happen, you can just go in and trace. And I'm glad that there's a lot of issues happening with this particular design because it's showing you guys how to fix it if these issues arise. And again, you're going to have to eyeball it a little bit. Make sure that these all say line on them because we have a very angular design. And now I should be able to click out and it should be a little more even. There we go. That's much better. So of course, with any digitizing, it's not going to be easy. You're going to have to make edits to it. Ah, there's a pink top to our tree. All right, so our next middle section, we need to do that same thing where we just remove this top satin stitch. So I'm going to, once again, take this, right click on just that design part and break up the lace. And there's our satin stitch. Oh, no, that's not it. That's our satin stitch. There we go. And I am going to go into my shape tool and right click, split line, right click and split line. And you're going to estimate kind of where it overlaps. And then just delete that one section that's going to overlap it. And there we go. That looks much cleaner. Now this one has some crazy stuff going on the edges too. So again, we go into our properties. Let's go into sharp rather than auto turn, or round, I mean, and kind of play with it. As soon as my computer catches up. Okay, that looks worse. Let's try bevel. Yeah, I'm not sure that's any better, but you know, it's kind of a little bit of a trial and error with these, especially with sharp angled designs. Oof, good God, that made it much worse. Let's try an auto. Okay, that looks a little better. And we'll just do one more instead of beveled. Let's do sharp again and see if that evens it out. Okay, it's a little bit better. I would still play with this a little bit more, but I'm not going to make you guys wait while I try to perfect a tree. Now, one thing, see this weird dark thing in the background? That's actually our preview of our background drop that we traced. I never removed it. So to remove it, there's a toggle view backdrop button with a little eyeball and that same mountain scene on your bottom left-hand side, and you can click on that and that'll go away. And now it's a little bit cleaner looking. All right, so once again, we have a little weird thing going on in here for our little border, and we can always come in here and just clean that up. And that one was an easy one because there was already a point I could just move. And there we go. Oops. So sometimes when you have designs like this that have layers, you do need to play with them and kind of clean them up a lot. It's a little more time consuming than just doing a plain heart like I had showed you. And of course, now we need to add our little circle on the top. However, instead of a circle, we could try to do a star. I don't know if this would stitch out right, so that's something we'd need to test. But we can go into our custom shapes and find a star. A rounded one is probably going to be easier, like the star 03 or star 004. Ooh, that's a huge star. And that way we could have the star at the top of the tree be our cool lace feeder for our string. So we're going to do mesh steel. I'm just going to remove that background. And this one I may actually want to be on top just because of what it is. You know what? I'm still going to bring it up to the top. The reason why I'm going to bring this up to be the first stitch still is because I want to make sure that our start and stop on that lace, because this doesn't have that mesh to hold it up, is going to be at the bottom still, which looks like it's on the side. And if it's underneath, it should then be right underneath the edge of the tree. There we go, and be protected. It doesn't look the same. I mean, we can try it on the top of the tree and see if it looks better, just for aesthetic purposes. I'm gonna switch some of our tree colors here so we don't have like a neon pink top, but you can kind of see what I'm going for here. So this then we would feed the lace through that star on the top. I would stitch it still to tell to make sure that it's going to stay together, but again, this is how you manually trace, and you would just have to remove the overlapped areas. And that's what I had to do on that dumpster ornament. All right, so I have been talking at you for about an hour, so I'm going to stop share for a moment and take a quick swig of tea, and then if you guys have any questions, you're welcome to ask.
I have a question about the star at the top. Could you put a circle inside there too, so that when you put the lace inside, or not the lace, the ribbon inside it, it won't get caught up in one of the star triangle pieces?
Yeah, so let's, I'm gonna do another screen share. So then in that case, what I would do, and let's see if it'll let me do it. Let's go to our happy little star here on the top. And I would almost treat him then like a regular shape. Let's do an auto lace. And we're gonna do two things here. So first we have our auto lace star. And I don't know why I changed it to a poop brown color. Thanks internet thing here. Just color all. Ugh, why are we doing a brown star? That's gross. Anyway, so I'm gonna go into my circles and draw a little circle inside. And with this circle, what I wanna do, a couple things. I wanna see if I can take away the lace that's underneath here and turn this just into a steel. So on our lace design, our actual star, we might be able to do that. This might be one of the few occasions that you would take your lace base and make the spacing really large. Because then there should be a little hole there. And same thing with our border. What I want to do with this, at least what I'm trying to do, is have that circle sit right in the middle. So it'll be held up by the border and everything else. The star will seem a little more solid. Take our lace base. Let's make this even bigger. Let's just do 10. Unfortunately, well, actually you could, you know what? I'm being silly about this. Let's break up our star and just delete the lace underneath, because you don't need it necessarily. Let's see if that'll work. All right, and now that circle, which is now MIA, there he is. Let's try him. Now again, this would be something you'd want to stitch out and really test. But I think with those steps, it should be okay. And because you have that border, it doesn't matter where the start and stop is for our lace. And now it won't get caught. What is this little black dot? Yeah, something like that. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
No problem. And again, just test it. You know, you never know with embroidery if it's going to really decide to work or not unless you try it. Are you guys all awake still?
Chelsea, on the lace itself, when I was doing that dumpster design, the very last stitch before it started, it ended, and then it did a jump and did two or three more stitches. And then you know how it says keep it clean every time you do a stitch. I take it out and clean up all the stitches on the back. When I did that, that whole stitch fell apart and came out. After I made the third or the fourth one, I realized I could have left it in because it got covered later. But how do you get to I think you mentioned during the class how to do locking off stitches. Can you switch it to, can you make it so that it locks off and then you can cut it?
Yeah, so two things that I want to talk about then. One is when it's stitching lace, don't worry about taking it out and trimming all of those threads on the back. In fact, don't even worry about that until after you rinse away your stabilizer, because at that point, because stabilizer, what it is a solid starch. So it is like a literal potato, fabric potato. And so when you rinse that away, it holds everything because that starch coats your threads, and that's why it gets a little hard if you have a lot of thick stitches. And then afterwards you can safely trim everything because it should be all solidified. I usually, and you know what, half the time with freestanding lace, especially if it's directional, I don't really bother trimming. Like I'll trim the threads, but I'm not going to make the back look perfect.
Mm.
You know, it's still, especially with like the dumpster design, it says 2020 on it. So if you hold it the other way, then it doesn't say 2020 anymore. If it's a reversible design, I'll try a little harder, but most of the designs I make, it's not going to look the same on the back unless you sit there and change the bobbin, and the stitch on the back is still going to be slightly different. All right, so let me do another screen share.
I did change the bobbin each time.
So for lock stitches and things like that, it's pretty easy. It's under here with your start command. So you can do jump, stop, or trim, stop, or frame out. And these are between stitches. I usually leave it at normal and normal here. This one, you know, it's just a tie on and tie off type. It's none, basic, or triangle. Usually this will tie on and tie off between stitches. But if it's something that's going to overlap it, it's not going to do a huge tie on or tie off because it's going to stitch over itself again. So it may not have that option for you. So I would just leave it and not try to trim it. Assume that the program knows what it's doing. Really, these are to turn it off. Triangle is another type of tie and tie off. I can't tell you the exact difference because it's kind of hard to figure that out when it's stitching. But you can turn off your tie in and tie off, which is not something you'd want to use for freestanding lace, but maybe if you're making a running quilting design and you don't want that tie on and tie off button, that's what you would use that for.
So
But
there's no way that I can fix that one stitch that keeps pulling out by that using that method.
no, and I mean, it shouldn't be doing just like 2 individual stitches and then moving on elsewhere. You may have something going on in the digitizing for that. So that might be a different problem that may not be able to be solved easily through your start and stop.
I think it's because I'm not supposed to trim it. I went back and trimmed the jump stitch before I started the next one and didn't realize till I did the third one that it would be covered up.
Mm.
Yeah, and that could be what it is. I mean, I would just let it stitch out and do its thing. The only time I really try to trim threads is if something, like I leave a really long trail when I'm doing, or tail when I'm doing a new color, and it starts stitching over those, and that's going to be just a pain in the neck to take out. So that I may stop it and trim that on the top, but I'm not going to worry too much about underneath.
Thanks.
All right, I'm going to stop recording now.